Welcome to Fashion For You with Nellie in partnership with SA Creatives, shooting from School of Fashion in Johannesburg. So to give you a broad overview of our series that we are introducing, which will focus on the representation of beauty ideals within the field of media, also focusing on the aspect of inclusivity and how exclusive inclusivity actually is. Today with me, I have Nande as my guest speaker. Nande, please can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I am Nande, like Anel has already mentioned. I am the acting HOD of the media department at the School of Fashion. I have been working within the media field for the longest time. I did my studies starting from undergrad all the way to master's at VET, and I majored in media studies, I majored in fashion and television and African languages, literature, so everything that has anything to do with representation. And the reason why we're here today, it is to introduce Anel's series obviously, but also to just spark the debate about representation in all its forms and manners. We're not just looking at representation of race or of gender or of age, but everything that has anything to do with media and how it sees beauty and how it frames and packages beauty. So we will be going through that debate today with Anel. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So the first question that comes to mind is, if we think about representation specifically in the field of media, is about asking difficult questions that does not necessarily have one true perfect answer. So even thinking about who the perfect person would be to be representing the show, for example, or to be represented on the cover page of a fashion magazine, or any show on television, who would that ideal person be? The problem in media is that there is always going to be a struggle for representation, because technically that ideal person does not technically exist. So basically, why you ask, why is a Caucasian woman presenting the show, is the fact that I also studied media, and at first I wanted to become a makeup artist or a photographer. And then I ultimately realized the bigger problem in media with regards to unrealistic beauty norms and standards that exist that we can't follow up to, which ultimately leads to low self-esteem within the generations. So basically, I then decided to become an educator to motivate and inspire my students to become part of the next generation that can not only focus on one specific question with one specific solution, but rather taking the bigger perception into consideration of the overall theme of inclusivity. Also, if we think about, we are all aware of the horrors of beauty standards and the methods that have been presented within history. For example, individuals eating tapeworms to lose weight, or using skin creams that is inclusive of mercury and cyanide, or using hair dye that is inclusive of toxic silver. So we are aware of these methods that were used to be perceived as being beautiful with regards to media. And the problem is that to this day, we are still adhering to methods that is basically unhealthy for our bodies in terms of being perceived as being beautiful. So for example, especially when we are in our teenage years, we all go through the phase of hormones and acne, and then we all want to have those medications that is basically drying out your lips and your eyes, even talking about nails in general, knowing that when you have your acrylic tips or your gel, that you are exposing yourself to the UV light, which has been associated with the increase of cancer and also damaging the skin at the end of the day. So we are aware that we are following these very dangerous methods and procedures to be perceived as being beautiful. And the overall theme of the discussion is, how can we create an unfiltered media where we are not influenced by media per se? So Nande, what is your idea of an unfiltered media with regards to the fashion industry? What would an unfiltered media environment look like?
Firstly, I don't think media would exist if we had an unfiltered media. The media industry historically has always been based on media being filtered, somebody's view of what is beautiful, what will sell, and then having the rest of the target audience, the rest of everybody, the ordinary people, following that standard. I mean, if you don't want to look like Naomi Campbell or Kate Moss or Kendall Jenner or Kylie Jenner, then obviously you're not going to buy the products that they're selling. So the idea is to create this ideal image so that we all want to look like that. Therefore, we buy the products that will make us look like that. So, I mean, there are so many different ways in which you filter media, in which media is filtered as well. If you are talking about the content and the propagandas and censorship and all of those different topics, you're talking about the content and the content that is presented in the different media fields. But also, if you're talking about within fashion and beauty specifically, how media is filtered, I mean, we have software like Photoshop, for example. I know we teach Photoshop and everybody needs to understand Photoshop and be able to work Photoshop because that is what industry wants. And obviously you're trying to airbrush certain ideas you don't want people to see. You have stretch marks or cellulite, all of those different ideas. In essence, that is what filtered media encompasses, but that is the very nature of media. So I don't think we have any specific category that is referred to as just the filtered media, because media is in itself filtered. But I think what we can think of when we're looking at unfiltering media or the unfiltered media, we can look at, there's actually a new breed, if you will, of fashion bloggers who are now not exposing the filtered media, but who are just speaking out about that and saying, like you were saying, that these are harmful stereotypes, these are harmful images, and obviously they are encouraging people to partake in these very dangerous, mostly dangerous forms of trying to be as beautiful as is prescribed by media. So when it comes to media, it is in essence filtered, and when we're looking at unfiltering the media, it is just making space available for everyone to be the kind of beautiful that they wish to be, rather than everybody looking like Kylie Jenner. You don't need to plump up your lips, you don't need to have any augmentation on your body, you don't need to do anything else. If you're comfortable with the way you are, how you are, then you are most welcome to be beautiful and present that to the world. There is an audience for that. There's an audience for authentic beauty, because obviously that is more relatable than trying to be perfect like celebrities. And I think with social media, we've seen how we used to think everybody was perfect, but now we know they're not. You know, social media, you'll see a celebrity just having fun on vacation, for example, and then somebody will snap a photo and show that, oh, actually Kim Kardashian has cellulite. And, you know, it suddenly becomes a thing. Now we know that ideally there is no one perfect being, even though we have these ideas that are presented by the media, but there is no one perfect person, which then says to the ordinary person, it is okay to be who you are, to look however you look.
The next question that I want to pose in terms of unfiltered, and where we touched on being yourself, looking like yourself, especially when it comes to the media, with regards to unfiltered and filtered, is the fact that whenever we share a picture or a celebrity shares a picture, there's this problem in terms of it is always deemed that you are either too skinny or too fat, too light or too dark, too tall or too thin. So what is this perfect vision then at the end of the day? And even if we look at the body positivity movement specifically, the body positivity movement isn't actually something so new. It has actually existed from the 1850s in the Victorian age, where the women started to wear the Victorian reform dress, where they basically started a movement against the trend or the norm of wearing a corset in terms of having that clinched in waist. And then also originally when the body positivity movement started, it was based on the beauty ideal perception in terms of the marginalized groups, such as the queer groups, people with disabilities, as well as our Black individuals. So once again, the whole communication rise that if you are not part of that specific group, are you then not allowed to be deemed as feeling positive about your body? And then the body positivity movement changed, And then it focused on moving against feminine beauty standards. So once again, a specific group is excluded from the movement of feeling positive about your body. And then at the end on social media, we are now seeing this toxic positivity, where people are now feeling pressured in terms of always having to feel positive about their body, even though they are not necessarily feeling healthy. So ultimately, talking about that, ultimately there is no wrong or right when it comes to the body positive movement. But in your opinion, how do you feel the body positive movement has attributed to the inclusivity in media?
I think when it comes to media and people feeling good about themselves and people feeling represented by the media, it shouldn't just be limited to just body positivity, because essentially what those movements focus on are the weight more than anything. Yeah. Whereas when it comes to representation, underrepresentation or misrepresentation in the media, we have transgenders, we have people who with darker skin tones, we have tall people, we have short people, you have chubby people, you have all different categories. We have Muslims. I mean, if you think about it, outside of the Arab context, where do you usually see any representation of Muslims? And we have such a large community of Muslims in South Africa, for example. But when it comes to fashion, are they represented? Do we see those representations? So I think when it comes to this movement and their agenda and what they seek to achieve, it is fine to be part of whatever movement relates to you. I mean, obviously you would relate to a different movement than myself. I would relate to a different movement than the next person. And again, the extent to which each one of us is represented, either in these movements, on covers of magazines, in television, in billboards, like in all these different aspects of the fashion media, it differs, it varies. So I think anybody who is represented is most welcome to not only be comfortable and happy about being represented, but champion the debates about why are you not representing other people. You know, try to shed light onto all these different pockets of industry that are not so prevalent in our covers. I think you opened with why you are presenting this segment, whereas you are pretty much the ideal. You are pretty much what we see when it comes to media and beauty on covers of magazines. You have the look of what we see when it comes to representation. But also, again, it doesn't just mean that because you see yourself, because you are represented, then you are comfortable, then you relax. This is not your fight, you know. This needs to be everybody's discussion. This needs to be everybody's topic. This needs to be what we are all comfortable discussing, so that when you see a magazine or when the next issue is coming up, you don't know for a fact that it will be somebody who looks like you. You know, it should be a transgender this week. It should be somebody who with dark skin tone next week. It should be somebody who's 2 sizes bigger than myself the following week. It should be a disabled person the other way. You know, so it should be everybody, because essentially we are all beautiful according to what we want. You know, I know it sounds cliche to say we are all beautiful, we're just different, but it is the nature of what we are as human beings, but it is completely different to what the media represents. And I think it is then our responsibility as people in these environments, whether we are in education, whether we are part of industry, we are working for a publication, or you're a fashion blogger. So if you have the platform, then it is also your responsibility to speak out on this, whether you are supporting this one or whether you're shedding light into this one, whether you are saying, hey, I am the ideal, but there are people who are being misrepresented. There are stereotypes that are being channeled on a daily basis. We need to look at this. So whichever way you are, this still needs to be your fight. Whether you are thin, it still needs to be your fight to have people who are not thin like you accepted as well. Or told they're beautiful. Or, I mean, if you don't want to say people are beautiful because they don't look like you, then don't say anything mean, you know. To be anti-cyberbullying, to be anti all of these things, all these negative stereotypes and these negative tropes that we see in the media, but also the opinions that we see online. We all know how social media can be vile and vicious. So, you know, so when it comes to whether you are the ideal or not, it shouldn't just be limited to, are you happy with where you are? Or if you are the underrepresented, then you need to join a movement. There's so many different platforms that we can all engage in. There's so many different ways in which we can be part of this bigger movement of representation as a whole, but not just body positivity.
Awesome. Thank you for that very in-depth discussion. And also you touched on a few points that I would really like to go into more depth. Basically talking about inclusivity and the representation of different groups on the cover of magazines. This has been a conversation that is not new to us or anyone at the end of the day. However, the very problematic approach is that only in the year of 2021, this year, Time magazine released their first cover that embedded transgender model, Elliot Page. Also that you spoke about in terms of the Muslim culture. So Vogue British magazine only had their first cover in 2017 that represented Halima Aden in her hijab. And British Vogue made this big uprising in terms of they are so successful for being the first, presenting the first cover page in 102 years, showing a Muslim woman in her hijab on the cover page. Which is so problematic because why did it take 102 years at the end of the day?
Absolutely. I think for me, the biggest thing that we need to focus on when we think about representation, especially for brands or publications like your British Vogue. I mean, Vogue has existed for over 100 years, like you've already said, but the fact that they feel like it's an achievement, the fact that people need to be applauded for, oh, you are the first one to be on a cover, you're the first black person, you're the first transgender, you're the first person of this size to be presented on a magazine. I don't think those are things we need to celebrate. Those are things we need to demand, you know, because if you look at Muslims, how many millions of Muslims do we have in the world for it to take 100 years for one person to be on a cover of a fashion magazine? And if you think about the industries and how much they support fashion and beauty, if you think about literally the people who buy these magazines, who support these media publications, who support these bloggers, who support these products. I mean, Kylie Jenner is a billionaire, and it's definitely not just people who are on the covers of magazines who have bought her content, you know. So I think for me, it should go over just being, oh yay, they finally done it, or we're being inclusive, because for me, it touches more on the idea that they are just doing it as a fad. It's a trend because that's what everybody's talking about now, and you want to be relevant, and therefore you do what everybody's doing. Again, if you think about representation and how many times or how often we've had these debates or discussions come up in media and in runway shows and in all of that, why is it now just on the cover and it's a transgender man? We've been talking about black women, we've been talking about underrepresented people, we've been talking about plus size models for years and years, and now they have a transgender in 2021. And I'll tell you why, because transgender is what is the trend now, you know, whereas in the previous years it would have been dark-skinned tone model, whereas in the year before it would have been plus size models. If you think about Fenty, for example, and how Rihanna just completely rearranged the industry, you know, she has completely shattered everything, and everybody's now following suit, because if you don't do it, then you're compared to the person who has done it, you know. So I think it is more than just something that will definitely be an achievement for them, or something to be lauded, or something that we now need to celebrate. I mean, they've waited for so long, and there's a reason for that. It's not like they didn't know that Muslim people exist. It's not like people didn't know there are black people out there. It's not like you didn't know there are people who aren't heterosexual. You know, so all of these different things aren't things to be celebrated, because they're just doing it because that's the conversation, that's the topic of the day. And again, that is why discussions and forums like this are so important, so that these things are our everyday, and it is everybody's discussion. We are also so that we all become so well versed in these topics that we all feel like we have something to contribute towards this. If you're thinking about British Vogue, for example, I mean, I'm going to keep referring to it because the same example we spoke about, but if you're thinking about them and how many generations of people who've gone through journalism school, who've gone through fashion schools, who all come back and still represent exactly what has been represented before, you know. So the idea is it needs to be made very clear, and to our generation and to our students, to our kids, to everybody who wants to be in this industry, that you have a voice, use that voice. You know, if you get to a publication and all they represent are people who look like me, who are a little fair, who are not too dark, not too light, I mean, say something. Say there are more different shades, there's more to black people than just somebody who looks like that. Or if they're just representing nice little blonde girls with blue eyes, there's more to people than just that. You know, so there are always people who are being excluded. I think you did touch on that earlier when you said inclusivity is quite exclusive when it comes to this industry. So we need to be able to voice our opinions on this. We need to demand to be represented. You know, if you are supporting all these different cosmetic brands, they need to make products for you.
Yes.
Instead of having to instead of having to mix and match foundations because they don't have your tone, you need to say, I will not buy this product. I need a product that is made for me. You know, instead of trying to buy something that will make you look like the next person, buy something that makes you feel good about yourself. Buy something that enhances your beauty. Buy something that makes you feel good. You know, it's your money, it's your investment. It's literally, at the end of the day, it's your self-esteem. It's how you feel about yourself. It's how you feel about your community. So we should not have just 5 different ideas of what is beautiful. It should be such a wide variety, such a wide range, so that everybody is represented. Obviously, we cannot represent everyone at every magazine cover or at every fashion show or television program. You know, it can't always be you have everybody there. Yeah. But you can try. You can most certainly try. Again, if you think about how Rihanna does Fenty, if you think of her runways, it's literally anyone and everyone you can think of. And it's so beautiful. It shouldn't be, oh, this is something absolutely amazing. We need to talk about it. This is what everybody has done. It needs to be, that is what society is. So media needs to be a representation of society. It should not dictate to society, especially when it comes to beauty standards and norms, because, I mean, you can't tell me how to be beautiful.
You've really introduced a lot of interesting points. And I think what is very important is that specifically, we tend to see, especially when looking at the cover pages, we are able to identify that British Vogue presented inclusivity in this year, and all of our international brands have made some contribution towards presenting an inclusive group or individuals. In 2018, Cosmopolitan South Africa posted their first cover page of transgender. However, the problematic approach with that is that it was the actress Laverne Cox, who is an American actress instead of a South African. So why are you showcasing someone to the target audience, knowing that the Cosmopolitan South Africa publication is for the South African audience? Why not use a transgender person from within the South African context?
I think with that, there's so many different things that you can look at when you're trying to understand the reasoning behind that. So firstly, they're trying to sell, if it's just about the sales, they're trying to sell more magazines because people will relate to her, more people know her, rather than if they got Andy or so, like a random person that nobody knows of. If you think about the South African context, who is the most prevalent transgender person in media that they would put on their cover in order to sell more? At the end of the day, the media is a business, you know. It is money first and everything else after. So again, when they are looking at that and they're only doing it now, are they doing it because this person is a star and they wish to present that person on the cover, or are they doing it because the transgender topic is now a thing, so they want to be relevant and they're saying, oh hey, here's this famous person who represents this cause, you know. But I think, again, when it comes to knowing your audience and understanding your audience, but also taking responsibility as somebody with a platform, well, as a business or a company with a platform that's huge, it then becomes quite urgent that they speak to their audience, they speak to the South African people. If you have a customer base of a certain thousands of people who buy your magazines, surely you will not have 10 copies sold if you have somebody they don't know. If you are introducing a topic that is so important to people who are the backbone of this industry. You know, if you think about the LGBTQI, they are the backbone of the fashion and beauty industry anywhere in the world. So if you are now thinking about sales rather than thinking about furthering their cause, supporting these people. I mean, if you think about South Africa and how many people are killed every day because they're gay, because they're lesbian, because they dress like this, because, you know, and how many spaces they're not allowed into. I think it is the responsibility, not just hi, everybody's talking about this, I'd like to be relevant as well, and you introduce that person or you have a transgender person on the cover. It becomes everybody's contribution, especially for the industries that benefit so much from these communities. So again, it's a hit and miss. Yeah. They're obviously going for sales, they're obviously going for the face that everybody will relate to. But what about the local people? What about the people who will actually buy that magazine, who will actually give back to you, who will support your business? So, you know, it's always a catch-22 for the media houses and the publications. But again, what is more important?
Why now? Why do you think this whole conversation about inclusivity and unfiltered media is relevant now? Why do we need to focus on it now?
It's always been very important. It's just been ignored because it didn't matter. It didn't have any commercial value. It didn't have any value in terms of people not buying the content, people not subscribing to the magazines. I mean, all of us know about Vogue magazines. We all know about Marie Claire, Harper's Bazaar, all of these different magazines, and everybody wants to shoot for them. If you're a fashion photographer, you want your clothes there. If you're a fashion designer, you know, everybody aspires to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So the companies never really had a reason to change their model. You know, if you aspire to look like Kate Moss, then that's what everything needs to be like. If you are a new fashion model, you need to look like that. If you are a fashion designer, you need to design for that. If you're a makeup artist, you need to be able to apply makeup on that face, makeup that is what is on whatever cover at the moment that is relevant at the time, you know. So it's never been anything urgent for the publications and for media as a whole. It's never been anything that will hurt them. So for them, they've always treated it as like a favor if they represent somebody who's different, or it's always been a little niche market that they're trying to go into, or it's always been, oh, now they want everybody to talk about them, so they're being a little opportunistic because they're thinking nobody else is doing it, let me do it, you know. But it's never been on the agenda of how, it's never been part of their business model, you know. But why is it important now? Now we have fashion bloggers, now we have millions and millions of people who can literally sit and be so influential. So it's no longer now just up to these well-established publications, and it's no longer just up to celebrities. It's now everybody's game. Everybody can represent, everybody can speak truth to whatever they feel most passionate about. But the problem is, if you have bloggers who themselves see themselves through the eyes of what media has always been propagating, then it becomes a problem because they are just now, they're just regurgitating the same old song that we've heard forever and a day. You know, so we now need people who are aware that you can be as different as you want to be, but you will still be relevant, you'll still be valued, you'll still have space in this industry. Again, we need our students to understand that when you graduate, you don't need to go work for a publication and do as they say. You have a voice, you know. If you want to be your own person, if you want to be your own brand and you have something to say, you have something to offer, then do that. You know, lend your voice, your skills, and everything else that you have to these different causes, so that we don't see people harming themselves because they're trying to be beautiful according to somebody else's ideas of what is beautiful. If you think about the South African context most specifically, there was a teenage girl in Limpopo who committed suicide not so long ago because she was bullied at school. She was told she was ugly, she's not beautiful because she's dark-skinned. If you think about that and you try to understand it, it is so ridiculous that not only in South Africa, but in 2021, you have kids who still believe you need to look like me or 2 shades lighter than me to be beautiful. You know, it is so ridiculous, and the only way that we could ever eradicate those things, the only way that we can ever mitigate those ideas or those perceptions of beauty is if we talk about it. We talk about it constantly, and it needs to be urgent. It needs to be a conversation for everyone. If they've seen these ideas or these ideas and ways in which beauty is perceived, they've seen that from magazines, they've seen that from the industry itself. So it is now the responsibility of the industry to change those ideas. If the established houses won't do it, then let it be everybody else's communication to the world. Let it be your idea that I am beautiful, I look this way, the person next to me is beautiful, they look this way. I mean, brands are starting to wake up to that. I mean, I know that I'm saying that some of them are doing it just as a trend because that's what everybody's talking about, but honestly, some of them are doing it. Some of them are supporting the underrepresented people or the underrepresented pockets of our industry. So it's always very beautiful to see, but it is very important now because, I mean, there's no better time than the present, you know, and we cannot delay this topic any further.
Thank you for that very insightful communication and sharing your thoughts. For our final question for wrapping up this session, I would like to ask you, in your specific field that you refer to as being the educational field at this moment, so in your space, in your specific field, what is it that you are doing to be the change that you wish to see?
Thank you for that question, Anel. So for myself, I mean, I could just give you one example of what we are doing within my department, the media department at the School of Fashion. So what I am looking at this year, again, we are going through with this theme of if media was unfiltered, what would fashion look like? So I'm obviously having discussions with lecturers and module coordinators about this topic to try to get everybody to include and embed this within their teaching. So it is a theme for the department as a whole, as you would know, as part of my department. So that is what I'm championing this year. And next year we'll be looking at something different. So instead of just saying, okay, you guys are writing or creating content for a blog or for a publication, write about what you want, or here's a random topic, or what is here's what everybody else is writing about. Now we're trying to get them to talk about these very important questions, and hopefully it will cultivate a culture of debate within them. It will also get them to understand that they have a voice, they can use the voice, they have their voice to get to engage in these discussions.
Thank you so much, Nande, for your time today and for sharing your insight and knowledge with the Fashion Forum with Nellie.